Janome.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Michael Smith. I'm the National Consumer Education Manager of Janome Canada, and I'm coming to you from the Janome Sewing and Learning Centre in Oakville, Ontario, to talk about one of our fabulous quilting machines in the Janome line to help you get all your UFOs done quicker and easier than ever. Today we're going to talk about the fabulous Quilt Maker Pro 16. So if you've been on the fence thinking, oh, I would love a long arm at home to do all my quilting myself, but you just don't either have the budget or the space for a big long arm quilting frame, perhaps the Quilt Maker Pro 16 is for you. As you'll see, it really does not take up a whole lot of space. It's a different configuration than your traditional long arm. It is a 5-foot frame. So ultimately, this is the same size as your standard bathtub. So perhaps even if you're thinking, oh, I don't have enough room in my house, well, maybe you have a spare bathroom you're not really using. How about ripping out that bathtub and you have enough room for a Quilt Maker Pro 16? You have about 14 inches in the quilting frame here, 14 inches by 48 inches of quilting space. So a lot of room to, again, quilt either a big quilt, queen or king size, whatever kind of size quilting project you'd like to do, you can accommodate here. Or then again, a great setup. A lot of people say, oh, I don't really make big bed quilts anymore. So the Quilt Maker Pro 16 is a perfect setup if you are quilting a lot of those digitally printed panels that are very popular, or let's say you've got placemats or a table runner. So this is a great setup for that. It is a modern spin on a traditional quilting frame that normally would be out of wood. But here we've got it very sturdy metal, and we have these very sturdy clamp system. So instead of the traditional rollers, like your traditional long arm quilting frame, we have this very cool hoop system with the clamp. So your project is very firmly clamped into place. Now the machine head itself is 16 inches throat space by about 8.5 inches tall. So again, if you're quilting on your domestic sewing machine and you just would like more space, well, yes, you definitely have it here with, again, 16 inches by about 8.5 inches high. So regardless, again, how big that project is, it can accumulate here in the space. We have lots of things like, oh yes, our fabulous bobbin winder included, and they use the big M-class bobbins. That these are much bigger than our traditional, class 15 little plastic Janome bobbins. These big metal M-class bobbins will allow you to have more bobbin thread. So that's great, you're changing it a lot less. And I love this bobbin winder that again comes included with your Quilt Maker Pro 16 because this bobbin winder has a stop and start button and a speed control. So when I start winding my own bobbins, I always like to turn the speed control down. So then I have it all threaded correctly. And again, there's lots of instructions in the manual on how to thread the bobbin correctly. But when I turn the speed control down and hit the start button, I'd like to have it on slow. So then just to make sure everything winds correctly, we can stop it, again, double check that nothing has jumped out of the tensions, everything is firmly in place. Then when we know it's gonna wind correctly, we turn it up and then we can really crank it up and let it go. I love using Armadillo quilt thread, but you can use any thread you would like. It's really fantastic. So again, great, you can wind your own bobbins, or then yes, you can use pre-wound bobbins. In fact, this one on cardboard comes with your machine as well. So yes, you can use pre-wound bobbins, just make sure that they're the class M class, the really big bobbins. So bobbin winder comes included with your machine. The frame itself, is adjustable in height. So you can, regardless of how tall you are, you could even move this down a little lower, so you could sit down on a stool or maybe one of our fabulous aero chairs, because with this unique hoop system, I have enough room for my knees here to go under the quilting frame, so I could even sit down as well. Or again, move it up a little taller, depending on how tall you are. When you're quilting, you want your elbows to be about at a 90-degree angle to the handlebars. So again, you can fully adjust this frame for you. Now the frame itself comes on adjustable legs, so if your floor surface is not even, very few of us live in a house that's completely flat and square, so you can adjust each of those legs individually, so that's great. Or on my frame here, I have the optional casters, which is a great accessory to have, because if you're, again, really fighting for space, you're only quilting at one side of the machine at one time. So if I'm here at the front of the machine doing a all over meandering, or I'm gonna do some ruler quilting, I only need to be at the front of the machine. So with my casters, I can push this machine all the way against the wall, so again, saving space. Or if we're going to then get the optional rear handlebars, and I'm going to do a paper pantograph from the back of the machine, again with the casters, we can wheel this machine, so then this side is against the wall, and then we're on this side quilting. We only need to walk around one side of the machine, so again with the casters, you push one side of the machine up against the wall, and then you walk around the other one to make any adjustments. So again, really doesn't take up a lot of floor space, and you can totally customize it to fit your needs. So yes, I've got part of the quilt loaded, but I will load the rest of it. Very simple and easy. Now already you can see here I'm going to do a table runner, but already I have my quilt backing and my batting and my quilt top sandwiched together. I love using our artistic tack spray to spray baste these layers together. So that way they're a temporary hold, so I don't need to use safety pins. I don't want to get those in the way. Now you could also layer your batting or your quilt backing first, clamp it all down, then lay your batting on top, and then lay your quilt top layer on top. So they don't have to be spray basted ahead of time. You could layer them one on top of the other individually. So it's whatever you prefer. I love, again, using that artistic tack spray when I can. It just makes it quicker and easier. So with this clamp system, we've got the smaller clamps like this, and then we have the one really big clamp too. So then that I like putting in the front. Whenever you're loading your quilt on the traditional long arm frame or on this Quilt Maker Pro 16, you definitely want your quilt backing layer to be bigger. I always recommend about maybe 4 inches or 6 inches bigger, so then you have more room for your clamps, and then all this will eventually get cut off when you're ready to all your quilting is done, and then you're ready to bind your quilt, and then certainly all that little bit of extra fabric, you can always find a use for it, so nothing goes to waste. So I just want to make sure this, as you can see, they're very secure. I just want to make sure that's all nice and even, and then I can tighten them up even by rotating these clamps. You can rotate the back bar, which actually I'm going to just tuck this under this back bar like that. So then I can tighten this up a little better. So again, this is like a traditional quilting frame, but with a modern spin to it. There, that'll be a little better. So then as my quilt grows, I wrap it around this bar, and then again, I can adjust it and make it tighter. And by rotating these clamps, we can make them a little tighter as well. Now you'll notice on this side of the quilt, there we go, that's locked into place. I'll lock my back bar. You'll notice on this side of the quilt then, no matter what size your quilt is, in king size, sky's the limit, it just falls off to one side. I love having one of our arrow chairs here, so then it can support the rest of your quilt project. And no matter how big your quilt is in the front, and again, it'll just spill over to the front. And as you do your quilting in sections, once you quilt this, again, 14 by 48 inch section, Then you will just advance your quilt, roll it up on this backing bar, similar to a long arm quilting frame. You'll roll it all up here. And then once all this section is done, you'll move it over to the right. All of this will come up and then be clamped down. So that's how you're able to quilt a quilt regardless of size. It's really a cool system. And I will clamp this down. So again, everything is nicely tight. It's kind of tight like a drum. So now that I have my quilt loaded, we can talk about the fabulous features of the Quilt Maker Pro 16. You will see the wonderful telescoping thread stand, again, like all of our Janome long arm machines and like all industrial sewing machines, all have the telescoping thread stand for optimum thread delivery. I'm using our fabulous, again, Madeira Aero quilt thread. I love using it on our Quilt Maker Pro long arms. So I come down here, we have it looks like the traditional old-fashioned beehive tension, but it actually is very easy to adjust, a simple turn of the knob to adjust our tension. There's lots of instructions in the manual to give you some threading tips, and again, any kind of thread that you would like to use. And in fact, our fabulous long arm expert, Kelly McKenzie from Janome America, has produced a lot of videos on the Janome Quilt Maker Pro 18 and Quilt Maker Pro 16. So you can go to the Janome America YouTube channel to reviews Kelly's presentations about giving you some threading tips, how to adjust your tension. Very simple and easy. Yes, as we come down here, you'll see this beautiful halo of light here. So we can definitely get in and see what's happening at our needle. The machine uses the round, big, industrial, very strong needles. They're not the flat-backed needles like we use in our traditional domestic sewing machine. So we need the industrial needles, but again, never fear. I have in my handy little drawer that is also a fabulous optional accessory. So double check with your Janome dealer about all of these wonderful goodies that you can get for your Janome Quilt Maker Pro 16. This is a 5-foot drawer that can attach either to the front of your frame or to the back of your frame. It's whatever you prefer. I love having it here in the front, so it's quicker and easier to get to for me. But again, your machine comes with 2 packets of needles, but you can also get these, again, industrial needles from your Janome dealer as well. So lots, basically anything that you need to get started with quilting, other than the actual quilt sandwich as well. Chances are you have the batting and the fabric at home. But the machine itself comes with your whole packages of needles, your extra bobbins, all the tools to set up the frame, even tools like your little brush to clean up the bobbin area, your little screwdriver to adjust the bobbin tension as well, conveniently is up here on these fabulous magnets. I love this. Our Quilt Maker Pro 18 debuted these magnets, and that was definitely a feature when they were developing the Janome Quilt Maker Pro 16. The magnets is definitely something they said we have to include those magnets. Everybody loves those. So all of your tools can be up here off your quilting surface. I must admit, when I first started into long arm quilting, I was so guilty of leaving my tools on my quilting frame. And quite accidentally, you can run right into them, or even my friend, she ended up stitching her seam ripper into her quilt. So by having the magnetic strips up here, or again, our little screwdriver that we adjust the bobbin tensions can be up out of the way, our little scissors, again, conveniently in red for Janome, they can be up there, any kind of, pins, anything, or including this little Allen tool that comes with your Quilt Maker Pro 16 that you're going to use here to change out your needle, or you're going to use it to change your hopping foot, because yes, there's a variety of hopping feet that are available for your Janome Quilt Maker Pro 16, so then you can have a lot of fun with that. So yes, let's get into some quilting by focusing on the screen. So now that I have my quilt loaded on the frame, I always like having this little extra strip of fabric, just a scrap of fabric off to the side so we can experiment with the tension. So first we want to set our bobbin tension, and then we can play around with, again, the beehive tension at the side of the machine, which is our needle tension. So first you set your bobbin tension, and again, there's videos online how to do that and more instruction in your manual. And I like to bring up the bobbin thread by just doing a needle up and down, just like on our domestic sewing machine. And then once I have my bobbin up, I hold onto my threads and hit the start button, and away I go. And by having that little bit of the scrap of fabric off here to the side, again, I can see, is everything stitching okay? What does the tension looks like? I like doing these little curly loops, and then I also like doing some sharp points. Think of those like 5-pointed stars that we did when we were kids. So then you can more easily see that if you see any of your bobbin tension coming up, then you know you need to lighten the pressure of your needle tension, or then by having this little scrap of fabric off to the edge of your quilt, you can more easily see underneath. Then you don't have to quite crawl under the frame to see if any of your needle thread is showing in the bobbin. If you see your needle thread down underneath your quilt, then you need to tighten your bobbin tension, or loosen your bobbin tension, sorry. You need to loosen your bobbin tension, or you need to tighten your needle tension. So once you get that all perfected, then you're able to do some stitching on your actual quilt. Now you'll notice here on our fabulous LCD screen, we have a lot of touch controls. We've got some touch controls here on our handlebars, like needle up and down, stop and start. And then we've got the speed controls here to adjust our motor. Up or down. Now on our LCD screen here, we have 2 modes of stitching. We've got 1800 stitches per minute for our stitch regulator, and we also have a manual mode. So in the regulation mode, we can adjust our stitch length, either really small if we're going to be doing a lot of like tight pebbles, for example, really small curves. I like to turn up my stitch length, so then it's easier for me to go around these curves. Now ultimately you'll see I'm just using one hand now to move the machine. We do not need a death grip in order to do our quilting. In fact, the more relaxed you are, the better it is. So again, you can turn your stitches per inch down really, or up, so they're really tight, or then you can reduce it as well. So you can do it on the touch screen, or you could also reduce it here on your handlebars. You could reduce them or turn them up. So also in stitch regulation mode, we have 2 further modes of stitching. I'm currently now in the precision mode, which means when I stop moving the machine, the needle is going to stop right away. I'm not moving at all. The power is still on, but I've stopped moving the machine, so the needle is no longer going to cycle. Now, ultimately, too, we do have some choices. Do we want the needle to stop in the up position or the down position? So you can control that. Now, when I'm in the cruise mode, then we can adjust the motor speed here and turn that up, again, all the way up to our 1800 if we would like. So I'm in cruise mode now, so when I'm stitching, but then I stop moving, the needle is still gonna cycle up and down. Now, when I like using precision is when we're doing any kind of ruler quilting and we're going to then stop and move the ruler, so it's good to use precision, so you stop exactly where you want. Cruise mode is great to use if you're doing a lot of like meandering, overall stippling. When I'm going to be at the back of the machine doing a paper pantograph, then I like using the cruise mode so that every time I go into a sharp corner, the machine is just going to do a little extra stitch right in the corner before I pull off into another direction. So that way there's not going to be a skip stitch. Nothing is going to pull, And if we have the Pro Stitcher Premium computer, which is an optional accessory that we can get for our Quilt Maker Pro 16, the Pro Stitcher Premium computer recommends that we're in cruise control. So again, each of those functions has a purpose. And again, more instruction in your manual. Now, speaking of manual, yes, I have manual mode. So now I can become the stitch regulator. Now you'll hear once I start stitching in manual mode, the motor is running at a consistent speed. It's actually quite slow. Now, depending on what you're doing, again, maybe if you're doing some ruler quilting, you'll like to go at a smaller speed. As I'm doing my little stitching here, I notice, oh boy, my stitches are really long. You may experience that if you've done some free motion quilting on your domestic machine as well. You definitely need to time the speed of the machine versus the speed of your hands. And I find generally, especially with beginners, they run the machine really slow, but they move really fast. And therefore, oh yes, you get these big toenail catchers, is what I would often call them. So how to avoid that is we can turn up the motor, and again on our LCD screen, or we can turn it up here on our handlebars. So you'll hear the speed of the machine has changed. But then as I'm doing my stitching, oh yes, my stitches are much more consistent. Now, again, what speed that is totally a personal preference. We do have some presets here. So again, if you're going to be doing ruler quilting, for example, and if you wanted a slower speed, then you can set that as a preset to know, okay, every time you do ruler quilting, you just hit that preset and it automatically has adjusted the motor speed. If you're doing an all-over pantograph and you want to go a little faster, again, you can set that preset either on your LCD screen or on your handlebars. And there we go, that's recorded the speed. So then you don't have to keep setting it every time. And again, notice I'm moving the machine with only a couple of fingers. I'm not, again, no death grip needed. So it's really easy. We've got some diagnostics here in the tools. Oh, we've got even a calculator. We've got an alarm bell if you want to hear the little beeps, or do you want to turn them off? We can adjust our language if we wish. We can even set a timer. You know, sometimes when you're down in your sewing room and you're maybe told, you know, okay, you've got 10 minutes to sew, and you run down and all of a sudden half an hour goes away. So we can record the timer, and then it will record how long we are stitching. Now, as well, we've got information of how many stitches that our machine has taken over the lifetime of the machine. These numbers down here just refer to the version of the machine. You know, if there was any update, this is still a very new machine, but if there was ever an update to any of these controls, there is a USB port here at the side of the machine. So yes, it can be updated if need be. So under the little information tab, it'll tell you again what version it is and again the lifetime of the machine. So if ever you were going to buy a used machine, for example, or you were going to trade in, then you'll see how many stitches have been recorded over the lifetime of the machine. So there's again lots of things you can customize specifically in the tools, and then again more information in the little eye. So that's all on your touch screen. So yes, let me move to the back of the machine and show you, depending on what kind of quilter you are, we can do free motion at the front, or with the optional rear handlebars and optional laser light, then we're able to put a paper pantograph at the back of the machine. We've got a nice wide table here. So the rear handlebars and laser light are an optional accessories. They do come together. And then I have the same LCD screen here at the back of the machine with the same controls on the handlebars. So we don't have to learn new functions. They're the same, both front and back. So now I can use the follow the laser light, and now we don't have to worry about, you know, drawing or thinking, you know, with creating a quilting design, we can buy a paper pantograph very easily using the laser light to follow what is printed. Now, don't worry if you're not exactly on that paper, because no one is ever going to see what's happening at the on your quilt. No one is ever going to take that piece of paper and show it at the front of your quilt. So it's okay if you're a little off. And I'll just jump over here and if I'm a little too big on that curve, it doesn't matter. You just go with it. It's kind of like dancing with your machine. The more free and relaxed you are, the better your results will be. I find it when you go off the paper a little bit, when you try to quickly jump back into it, that's where you're going to notice where you went off a little bit. So just kind of go into it, and you'll definitely have a much better result, and it's definitely a lot of fun. And you can get paper pantographs of any size and any kind of design, probably from your Janome dealer. So double check with them, easily available, and what fun that is. So rear handlebars and laser light are an optional accessory, but definitely lets you have more creative fun with your Quilt Maker Pro 16. For more fun and fabulous things that you can do with your Janome Quilt Maker Pro 16, there are many optional hopping feet available. So this is your regular closed-toe hopping foot that comes on the machine, but from your Janome dealer, you can get, look at all of those, yes. Things like the ruler foot, so you can safely use rulers, which I will demo in just a moment. Then we've got things like, the echo feet and the couching feet. There's so many fun feet available, again, from your Janome dealer, so you can expand what you can do on your Quilt Maker Pro 16. A little bit of the fabulous, couching, yes, look at that. So by using the couching feet, again, you can use whatever kind of yarn, variety of yarn to create some extra texture with your quilting projects. It's not just quilting bed quilts. You can create a whole bunch of projects, which again, we'll show in just a minute, using some of those fun, fabulous feet. Now the ruler foot to safely use, we need the expandable ruler base, again, as an optional accessory that just clips here to the bed of your machine. So this now expands your area to 12 inches by about 11 inches. So we can safely use rulers once we switch out our hopping foot. Now, conveniently, your extra hopping feet come in a little packet like this. They even give you the little screw in case you happen to lose the one attached in the machine. So isn't that fabulous? So this hopping foot, very simple. Again, how convenient that our little Allen key is up here on our magnetic strips. We just want to loosen this screw. And then many times I've heard at shows and people say, I can't get this hopping foot off. Well, this bar, you can adjust this bar. So you just pull it up a little bit. There is your foot. I love hanging up the foot on the extra spool pin here. So that's good that we don't lose it. We definitely don't want to leave it on the machine. And then again, we just raise up that bar and then use our Allen tool. Again, we don't want to leave this on the quilting frame, so that goes up away. So now I've got this nice about 1/4 of an inch thick foot to match our fabulous 1/4 of an inch thick rulers. Now these are from our Janome So Comfortable line. There is a whole range of long arm quilting rulers you can use. You don't even need a Janome long arm in order to use them, although how fabulous if you do. So this way, again, I can safely put up the ruler against the foot and it's not going to jump out of place. So once I tuck this all under my foot, and we will move over here to do some ruler quilting. So if you would like to do, again, any kind of shapes or templates or straight lines like this, simple straight lines, maybe cross hatching even. You just let the ruler do the work, and what a great texture that adds to your quilt. So I will do the same, raising my bobbin up. And then again, I've got my ruler safely butted up against my foot, so nothing is going to move out of place. And then away I go. Now we can go off in any direction. That's the fun of ruler quilting. You're not marking your quilt very much at all because you're letting the ruler, the template, whatever you're using, be your guide. And again, you can go off in any direction. So how fun is that? Very simple, very easy to do. And again, we have so many shapes available. Now here's another fun thing you can do with your Janome Quilt Maker Pro 16. You can use it to actually bind your quilt. Once you finish all your beautiful quilting, you can use this fabulous square feet. It's a set. One is 1/2 inch wide, the other is 1/4 inch wide, and they're clear so you can really see what's happening at the needle. And I love using these feet to attach your binding on the quilting frame. So what you can do, just like you would your traditional quilt, there is my binding. And again, I will start with my big binding strip in the middle of the quilt, and I'll go off one side to the right and one side to the left, miter the corner at each side, come down the quilt on one side, come down the quilt on the other side, and at the very bottom is where I'll join the two layers together. So you'd have to measure your binding ahead of time to make sure that you don't run out, but I'm going to get started here, going off to the right, and then when I get to my corner, I'm just gonna pull off the quilt. So then I can I'll move that up a little more. I'll do my miter in the traditional way, folding it over on an angle and then folding it down, just as I do on the domestic sewing machine. Now, if this bump is a little too thick, again, you can raise up your foot just to grasp it firmly, to lift it up over that bump and continue your stitching all the way down. So you would do that down on the right side, and then I'm going to grab my bobbin thread up. I always like to make it neater, so that way I have less threads to trim on the bottom. So then I go back to my middle. So if this was all the way down the one side of my quilt, and then I go back to the middle, and again, normally I'd raise my bobbin thread, and then I stitch to the left side. And again, because I've got this square foot, I know I've got a consistent 1/4 inch from the edge of my binding. So once I get to the corner, again, I'm just gonna go off to the back so I can fold up this miter again on a 45-degree angle and then drop it down. Again, just as we do on our domestic machine. And again, if this bulk is a little too much, you just lift up your foot all the way down one side. Now, once you get to the bottom of the quilt, you've stitched your binding down each side and have done the miters at each corner. So when I'm coming across the bottom of the quilt, I've made this little 45-degree angle in the binding to create this little pocket here. So as I do my stitching, I come up to, a couple of inches and do a little tack stitch there. So then this is secured, but this is still open. So then when I do the opposite side, I've got it all mitered in the corner, and then I'm coming along, so then we can, it would be this way. So I'm coming along, so then this extra binding can just overlap into it however much it needs to, and then you can trim that off. But it's going to overlap into that little pocket there. So then we can come along and secure that into place. So then that way, when we go back to I'll just move the machine out of the way here. So then when we come back to see our joint there, we would then trim off our quilt. We could in fact trim it off even while it's on the frame, and then, you know, this would fold over in the traditional manner. We could hand sew that up if we wish, and then our miters way up here, you know, once we trim off the edge, will fold out just as normal. So that is how you could bind your quilt on the frame with your fabulous Janome Quilt Maker Pro 16 and these clear feet. Now, the wonderful thing about these square feet is that and all of the optional hopping feet, including the ruler foot, it'll fit the Janome Quilt Maker Pro 18, Janome Quilt Maker Pro 16, Janome Quilt Maker Pro 20, and the Quilt Maker Pro 18 Versa. So the feet will work in all those machines, so you can have a lot of fun with your long arm. More of the fabulous rulers from the So Comfortable line. Oh, we've got arcs and clamshells, circles, any kind of shape you would like. Again, all available from your Janome dealer from the Janome So Comfortable line. But some of the fun projects you can make, again, with the optional Pro Stitcher Premium computer that will go on top of your machine there. So you can have computerized designs like these cute little cement trucks all stitched out by themselves. And then again, we would just couch on this yarn. And so now I've got a cute little scarf. Or again, at your pre-printed panels, this is a perfect size to do on your Quilt Maker Pro 16. And again, this is all stitching by the Pro Stitcher Premium computer, so it'll do the stitching for you. Or certainly, again, if you're not going to be doing bed quilts, but how about quilting your fabric first? All this stitching, all this cross hatching was done on the fabric first, and then I cut it up to make the tote bag. Or with another one as well, again, first I cut the fabric, or first I quilted the fabric and then I cut it all out to make the tote bag. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with your Quilt Maker Pro 16 and Quilt Maker Pro 18, Quilt Maker Pro 20, and the Quilt Maker Pro 18 Versa. So double check with your Janome dealer. And thank you so much for joining me. Happy quilting.